Thank you, Minister, for your insight. I'm Dylan Low from NTU. Wanted to ask you a question on foreign influence and interference, which you already dealt with a bit. I'd just like to probe a bit further. It's been a few years since FICA was passed. Just like to ask, how do you see the threat evolving? Are there new ways in which state actors, non-state actors are trying to do foreign interference or influence? And relatedly, do you think the current toolkit of the government is enough to deal with these threats? Thank you.
Well, there are a number of different threats to this. First of all, the nature of the problem is huge, in the sense that the ability to use the internet through a variety of means, and there are countries which can put thousands of people, either directly or through private sector, to attack you, to mislead, to use the environment to try and intervene in your elections. We've seen that happen a lot in Europe, in US. We haven't seen a lot happening in Asia, but we have seen some. So the threat is real, the interference is real. If you look at the intelligence reports that are issued in France, in US, in Sweden, in Norway, in the Baltic states, in Germany, they all documented. I mean, you look at this headlines. Now, I'm not saying that these are true, but you can see country after country, serious people making these allegations and statements. So in my mind, in my view, it's real. They haven't been so focused on Singapore yet. But we never wait for the problem to land at our doorstep, which is why we passed FICA ahead of time. We don't wait for these things to happen. We move ahead. And last year, we intervened twice. There were 10 websites that were multiplying specific viewpoints, we believed, of a foreign viewpoint. And we intervened and we said that this no can do, and we shut them down. And we did that once in, I think, June or August, and the second time in October last year, we intervened. Now, FICA gives us a lot of powers to do this. And one of the advantages that I see of such legislation is that when people know you can do these things, they are much more careful. The problem is managed even before it becomes a problem. So we have the powers, but I don't want you to go away thinking that those powers are enough for us to deal with the nature of the problem, because the internet and the American platforms, which inadvertently lend themselves to all of this, say that all of this is allowed under the rubric of free speech. In my view, the public square needs to be protected. Free speech doesn't mean that it's falsehoods are industrialized. You need to keep it within a framework. It can be unreasonable speech, it can be different viewpoints, but there isn't much scope for falsehoods in there, because there's mislead. And you cannot have an honest debate when your facts are different from mine. How do we have a debate? So you see the consequences elsewhere. So it's a serious problem. We have some powers. I don't overestimate our powers. We have so far avoided major trouble because people haven't been that interested in us.
What happened in Bangladesh last year?
Yeah.
Indonesia this year.
Yeah.
And Nepal. And I'm talking about the speed at which events took place. What are the lessons that you, as Minister for Security, drove from these? And what should we be watching out for?
You go back to Sri Lanka. The president was elected with 52% of the vote, and it was considered a landslide because the next person had 42%. So it was a clear 10% margin. There was no question he had the majority. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, president. Then COVID hits. There were protests. To me, there were many questions, many odd questions about what happened. You had these protesters protesting. They seemed very organized, the leaders. They had a list of houses which needed to be torched. So they went around in the evenings and torching those houses. And the Western media classified them as democracy protesters. And you had the UK and US ambassadors tweeting regularly. Can we have those slides? Do we have them here? This is, you look at the BBC, Sri Lanka crowd breaks Rajapaksa grip on power. So, these are thugs and vandals who are in there. If people break into the Istana and do all of this, that is supposed to be because they are democratic. The Western media. Move on. You look at what, and when there was a response by the security forces, you had the British and American ambassadors saying that these people are expressing their opinion and using their voice, and you must prioritize peace and you must not attack them. This is hypocrisy at the highest levels. And to me, there were. Now, Ms. Gotabaya Rajapaksa and the Rajapaksa family is known to be close to China. He also had a very strong grip on power. My own takeaway is that some governments in the world don't like very independent, smaller countries, which particularly may swing to China. If you look at, and much of this protest had similarities with what happened in Hong Kong. Hong Kong was the original example. So if I can show you in Hong Kong, this guy, pro-democracy activist. Why? Because he rams glass doors, defaces and tears down portraits, smashes furniture. So he's a democracy activist. Move on. This is what they were doing, right? Democracy activists. Move on. They were trained again. And what we saw is that, a crowd of 50,000 comes, 200 chaps in there are provocateurs. They throw things. Now, police are outside. They have to respond. And when they respond, surely innocent people get hurt. But that's the whole purpose of these demonstrations and protests. You get innocents hurt, you get it into the media, get everyone angry, it's police brutality. And they received funding from foreign NGOs, which is a code name for various intelligence agencies. Move on. And then you look at what the Washington Post and everyone else says. Crackdown. It's always the police who break their rules. Police are the ones who are brutal, never the democracy protesters. Move on. This tells you the hypocrisy at its highest. On the left is the protesters at Capitol Hill. When it happens in Washington, it's violence, and UK political leaders condemn it. The same newspaper carries a different headline. Jeremy Hunt backs Hong Kong citizens' right to protest when they were attacking the Hong Kong legislature. Right? And these people tell us what our media ought to be like. So the media, very often part of the foreign policy, the ambassadors, the NGOs, it's today very easy to use platforms to create riots. What do you need? You need about 200 people. Go there, create some violence, and there are enough disenchanted people who will join you, pay people some money, you get thousands on the street. Bangladesh, certainly in Hong Kong, in the Chinese government's view is that it's Western-backed. COVID intervened and the Chinese government took the opportunity to say no more gatherings, and then they changed the laws and they arrested everybody, and now there are no more protests. If there was a real movement for democracy, you won't have what you have today. Sri Lanka, again, it was a short period of time, crowds were mobilized, government changed. So you can be democratically elected, but change can be organized in this way. Bangladesh, we may not all agree with the way Sheikh Hasina took power, But Bangladesh saw growth at about 6-7% per year for pretty much about 14 years. Then you had COVID, it got into trouble. What did you have? You have a few students, groups, NGOs, financed, same modus operandi. Again, Western governments coming in to say you shouldn't intervene. And they add one more weapon nowadays, which is they go to in Sri Lanka, they were talking directly to the senior military commanders and police officers and said, you better not intervene. Now, in Singapore, if any of them dared to meet our people and said that, we would have turfed them out. I mean, you as an ambassador of a foreign government dare to come to my police officers and generals and tell them that they ought not to intervene? They take instructions from the government, not from you. They were doing this directly, and they were even going in at brigade levels and talking. And second thing they did was, they said, if you intervened, we'll impose sanctions on you and your children who are studying in the US or UK. So you have to be very clear-eyed about countries and their motivations. We are all friends, but do they like the fact that the Singapore government is independent and is able to enforce its viewpoints vis-a-vis them? People prefer a more pliant government. So today, Bangladesh, they say democracy. Let's see when the elections are held, what happens. Sri Lanka lost a few years through turmoil, but hopefully, you have to hope that these countries recover. So I am skeptical about a fair bit, but in Singapore, the lessons we take away are, once 5,000, 10,000 people come together, and if you have saboteurs in there, it's going to be very difficult to deal with. So the starting point is you don't allow illegal protests. You want to protest, there are designated spaces, you go there. Second, your intel has got to be good and you've got to move in very early if they are saboteurs. Don't allow. Third, if NGOs are receiving money under FICA, you deal with it. Fourth, if foreign ambassadors try and intervene, turf them out.